What's going on, everyone? Welcome back to another Resident Evil video, and welcome to the Mod Kid channel. Now that we are officially in 2025, I wanted to do a video that I always aim to do at the beginning of each year, and that is ranking my favorite Resident Evil games from worst to best. This year, I'm going to be ranking all the mainline Resident Evil games, including RE0 up until 8, and even the 4 remakes, and along with Code Veronica X, because I think that game is also a mainline story game. Also, there is no incorrect entries in this list because this is my ranking of the RE games, and it is completely compiled together by yours truly.
Jill, so you're safe.
That's what I was going to say.
Starting off this list in what my opinion is the worst of the worst when it comes to the mainline RE games. In my opinion, I think the original Resident Evil 1 is definitely the hardest game to actually master the controls to, and also have fun playing, and even take seriously at times with all those corny dialogues. I was never really a big fan of RE1 for the campaign and the slow kind of gameplay, but I can respect it for being the first of its kind and being the foundation for what became the rest of the Resident Evil franchise. I can already see you guys getting ready to type up those hate comments from a mile away, but to be honest, I was never really a big fan of Resident Evil 7, so it's gonna be very low on this list for me. For starters, I was never really a big fan of the first-person camera angles, so I was very excited when Resident Evil 8 actually came out with the DLC and included third-person camera angles for their campaign, because the first-person camera angle kind of ruined my experience for RE7 a lot for me, in my opinion. Also, the ship part where you have to play as Mia or Zoe is just absolutely brutal, and I don't recommend playing it at all.
Wait! You're under arrest!
No thanks, Dollface. I've already worn handcuffs.
I could shoot, you know!
I'm pretty sure at this point, some of you guys are starting to catch on and realize that some of my least favorite Resident Evil games are the ones that are really difficult to play and have fun playing, and this one is certainly one of them. I will actually give it to Resident Evil 0 though, because it did have a bit of a survival horror feel that the classic RE games actually had, but one thing about RE0 that takes it apart from the rest is that the switching between characters is really confusing at times, and the lack of having no inventory box whatsoever is definitely a game changer for us RE fans.
Pursue them. The lost lamps are escaping.
When ranking the mainline RE games and their remakes, I just could not see me putting the RE4 Remake any higher up on this list than this entry. There is actually a few things about the RE4 Remake that make it a little bit better than the original, like having better graphics and better gameplay mechanics, but to this day I always find myself going back to play the original RE4 way before even thinking about replaying the remake. I was also a huge fan of the RE4 Mercenaries, and I feel like the remake kind of butchered it with their version of the Mercenaries. Now coming in at my top 10 favorite mainline Resident Evil games, we have Resident Evil 6. I would have to say it's very fitting to call Resident Evil 6 one of those guilty pleasure kind of games, because there's a lot of game modes in RE6 that I actually have a lot of fun playing. And not only that, but they have so many different campaigns, with all 4 of them being at least somewhat fun, but there is a couple of moments where the action is just too overwhelming and it just no longer feels like a Resident Evil game.
Hold up, wait a minute, something ain't right.
Who are you working for?
I'll tell you, if you get me out of here. I'll pay you whatever you want.
Resident Evil 3 Remake is lucky enough to make its way into number 9 on this list for me, as I actually did have a fair share of fond memories playing this game around the COVID era and getting really into speedrunning this game as well. So that places RE3 Remake in a very special place in my heart, but one thing that loses a lot of points is that this game was a very, very short game.
You two go. I'll secure this area.
Stay sharp.
Like I said earlier, I was never really a big fan of the Resident Evil 1 story, or the gameplay for that matter, but Resident Evil 1 Remake was quite an improvement from the original, so I am definitely going to have to put this one in the number 8 spot, whereas the original Resident Evil 1 is going to be going down in the bottom as the worst Resident Evil game in my opinion. I always thought running around the mansion in RE1 was a long drawn out part of the game that gets pretty boring after a while, but in the remake they did actually up the fear and anticipation quite a bit when adding the Crimson Heads.
Is she okay?
Sleeping like a baby. That smells good. What's that?
Oh, hands off, mister.
Making its way halfway into this list is Resident Evil 8 Village, and I think that's a very fitting spot for this game because I like this game a whole lot and I've played it several times before, and I even plan on playing it more in the future to get all the trophies. But every time I consider booting up this game, it is a pretty big commitment just because of how long the campaign can be and because of how much of the cutscenes they actually force you to watch. Another reason that makes me like this game more is the third-person camera angles.
Please promise that you won't leave me alone again.
I'm sorry, Claire, but it's not over yet. There's still something we've got to do.
Resident Evil Code Veronica X is going to be making its way into my top 6 favorite mainline Resident Evil games. Apparently, Code Veronica X was supposed to be one of the mainline story games. In fact, it was supposed to be Resident Evil 3, but we all know what ended up happening there.
That was a mistake. Mistakes were made, friends.
Apart from RE2 and Dead Aim, this is one of the first Resident Evil games I played at a very young age, and this game holds a very special place in my heart, so much so that I went ahead and got the skeleton portrait tattooed on me for the rest of my life. Now I just gotta get 1126 below it so I can remember the password forever.
Carlos?
It looks like our roles have been reversed from when we originally met, huh? Don't worry, Jill. This chapel is safe.
Here we are with my top 5 favorite Resident Evil games, and coming in at number 5 is the OG Resident Evil 3. I was just talking about OG RE3, and it's very similar to Code Veronica X. This game held a very special place in my heart throughout my entire life, even my teenage years. So much so that I went and I got the clock tower tattooed on me for the rest of my life as well. Also, this game holds one of the hardest puzzles in Resident Evil history. At number 4 is, in my opinion, the best remake that Resident Evil has ever done, and that is the Resident Evil 2 Remake. I think I might be a little bit biased at putting it at the number 4 spot because I did really enjoy this game for a long time when it was new, but I think a lot of you guys will agree that this was a really good game, except for the fact that it is kind of short. But I mean, so was the original, so we can't really complain, can we? But nothing will truly beat just how excited I was for the release of Resident Evil 2 Remake. I was only 16 years old at the time, and I was very eager to get my hands on that game for the first time. Just making its way into the top 3 is the OG Resident Evil 4, as my third favorite Resident Evil game in the mainline series. I'm a huge fan of the survival horror games, but I also like a lot of the action games, and I think that they absolutely nailed it when they did Resident Evil 4. There's a lot of other DLCs in RE games that I'm a really big fan of, but I think it's safe to say that the Separate Ways DLC is probably the best DLC that we have ever received in a Resident Evil game. Also, this game has my 2 favorite Resident Evil characters in it, so this is definitely going to be my 3rd favorite game. I'm a huge fan of anything that's nostalgia, and just hearing that sound right there is just so dang nostalgic, and it makes me want to go play the original RE2 on my PS3 right now. Everybody's favorite Resident Evil games are usually the ones that got them introduced to the series, and this is the game that got me introduced to the series. I will admit the game is pretty old and hard to play, which is why it's in the number 2 spot. But other than that, this game is an absolute blast to go back and play, and it feels like getting in a time machine.
You okay?
Yeah, sorry. It's nothing. Let's go.
If anyone knows me well enough, then you would know that once Resident Evil 5 came out, it has always been my favorite RE game of all time. Let me know down in the comments if anyone else used to play the other Resident Evil games before RE5 and used to just wish that they would be co-op. Because when I would play RE2, RE3, Code Veronica, and RE4, I would always wish that they would be co-op. So of course, when we got word that this was going to be a co-op Resident Evil game when the trailer dropped, you can only imagine how excited I was. And the best thing too is this game is still pretty good if you play solo. But the big thing to keep in mind is this game is at its best if you have a good friend to play it with. Also, the Mercenaries is my favorite Resident Evil game mode of all time, and RE5 has the best Mercenaries by far, so that gives it a lot of points for me. But there we have it, everyone. That is officially my ranking of the Resident Evil games from worst to best. Feel free to go down in the comments and let your voices be heard to let me know if you agree or disagree with my ranking, because I will be trying to read and respond to every single comment. Before I get out of here, I want to leave a very special shout out to my one and only YouTube Pro member, Ico Pro Sam. I post Resident Evil content every single day on this channel, so hit subscribe and hit the bell to not miss another single daily upload. Lastly, hit like on this video if you guys want to see more like it, and with that being said, I will see you guys in the next video tomorrow. Peace.